Nightbloom, Blood in the Mountain. Prologue. One night, in the little village of Bink, the colorful cheers of its people filled the air as the sound of a horn brought the start of the festivities. Music soon followed as the villagers paraded around town in chorus. However, there are still those that have yet to be enveloped by the joyful energy. In a building marked by a sign riddled with arrows and slash marks, a handful of people walked up toward a desk with tankards in their hands. Come on, newbie. This only happens once a year, one said, eyes trained on a man busy sorting out ammunition and other supplies into crates. How about you set your work aside tonight, Oakley? Even the chief's out there having fun. The diligent one sighed, shutting a number of the crates before putting them away. I suppose it couldn't hurt to get a bite to eat, but you can go ahead without me. I won't be long. They pulled out a few dull axes and daggers from behind the desk, placing them on a small tray before heading toward a door in the back. Lady Pelina, I'm almost done with the weekend inventory check. Diligent as ever, I see. A laugh sounded off from the back of the room. Standing in a doorway, an exceptionally tall lady with a cascade of sky blue hair took the tray of weapons away from the man. I get that you're eager to prove yourself to this branch of the guild, but you have the right to enjoy your life too. I'll handle these. Go have fun. This is your first Midal Fest. Can't have you spending it cooped up in here. In exchange, get me some food. Have fun, Oakley. Stood there in a state of mild shock. Oakley shook his head and turned to face the front door. He joined the others as they made their way to the village center to indulge in the revelry. Chief Sainamo is already wasted, he grumbled as the sight of a stocky silhouette danced by the fire. A tankard was shoved onto him, filled to the brim with booze. His companions were eager to get him to drink, but he raised his hand and stepped away. I'll go get something to eat. With a curt wave, Oakley broke away and walked leisurely down the packed streets. Elsewhere, on the outskirts of the village, in one of the back alleys, a group of children gathered. They buzzed with excitement, eager to join in on the fun, but the largest among them spoke before they could run off. Come on, stay focused, guys. This is going to be the last festival for the year, and after that, we're on our own. We have to get as much food and money as we can. They walked out at the head of the pack, with the other children following close by. Where's the new kid? The group turned around, finding a young girl in a daze, staring up at the sky. There was nothing to see except for the clouds so thick you couldn't see the moon or stars. She trembled, fear on her face, as she gripped the rags she wore as clothes. The leader placed a hand on her shoulder, snapping her out of the trance as she wiped away the tiny tears that began to form around her eyes. Sorry, Duriel. The lot of them mingled with the rest of the festival goers. Soon, however, they had split up and had gone to do whatever they pleased. Duriel, as well as some of the kids around his age, went up to some of the festival committee members, who seemed to be in the middle of some trouble. The new kid, a little afraid of being left alone, followed from a distance. She listened carefully, a tall task with the music and the cheering of the festival goers, but she managed. We're running out of ale near Hop Street. Sleet Scale's winning the competition again this year. They said we can take the reserves from the Southern Brewery, one said, slightly sloshed with booze herself. Are you sure it's not your fault? I didn't sign up to babysit you. Another replied, pulling out the small box and turning to the other. Got a light on you? Oh, Duriel. Come for work again. Perfect timing. We need as many hands as we can get. Duriel said nothing, simply turning to the others before nodding and following the two of them toward the brewery. As the new kid was about to follow them, a tantalizing scent reached her nose. She could pick out the familiar scent of roast wild boar, grilled fish, fresh fruits, but it was the first time they had all blended together in a bouquet like this. The sensation was too much, the temptation overpowering her mind and forcing her body to react on its natural course. Her stomach growled as she shambled over in the direction of a break in the action. There, sitting on a bench with a mountain of food by his side, was a man with hair so orange it rivaled the large bonfire at the village center. The man noticed her quickly, staring as she clutched her stomach and drooled over the food beside him. Come over. I can't finish this alone, he said with a smile while waving to the girl with a hand. She was shocked for a moment, but threw that aside quickly as she ran up to the bench and grabbed a roasted tail of some kind of reptile. The man laughed, taking bites of some fruit that was covered in so many layers of sugar it was hard to make out. Thank you, mister, the girl said, looking at the man as she chewed on her food. The two snuck glances at each other as they ate, people passing them by as they slowly but surely went through the pile. Is there anything I can do to repay you? My brother told me that I should always work hard for food, but I haven't done anything. The child, wiping sauce off her face with her arm, looked up at the man. With a smile, the man simply said, No need. He got up and asked if she had eaten enough to fill her stomach, and gave her one final hunk of meat for her to take. Take that to your family, free of charge. With those words hanging in the air, the man took whatever was left of the food, two bags, a reasonable amount compared to the mound it was before. He left, walking toward the building marked by arrows and other wear and tear. Lady Pelina, I got you some candied popped cones, Oakley said, returning to the guild hall with two bags in hand. Not Long after speaking, the door in the back of the room swung open, and an arm reached out. He placed one of the bags in the palm of its hand, seeing it swiftly return to the room and shut the door. With no plans left for the night, Oakley resigned himself to his quarters on the floor above. He let out a sigh, walking over to his bed, to stare up at the sky while snacking on the contents of the final bag. Dried leaves of some sort, dusted with a yellow powder. He stayed in his room for a while, time slipping by as he drifted closer and closer to sleep. With one final glance at the window, he noticed that the clouds had darkened. He wondered if a storm was coming, but what followed after pointed away from that. People screaming, and not in a merry way. It came from all around the building, loud enough he wondered if the building would start shaking from the sheer amount of energy in the air. Oakley? Emergency! Lady Pelena came rushing upstairs, stomping all the while. There's a fire at the brewery. Some kind of beast was spotted too. The two of them quickly got some equipment together and ran toward the blaze, the heat from the fire causing air currents that parted the sky, only to dot it with smoke. What do we do, Vice Chief? Oakley asked, looking around the place. The people around them were a mess. A drunken, shambling mass of screaming civilians and intoxicated guild members. I'll deal with the fire. You keep an eye out for the beast and rescue anyone who needs it. You're faster than me, so I'm trusting you with this, Lady Palina said assertively, stowing a crossbow before heading toward the nearest well to get some water. Oakley took off and circled the building a dozen times, seeing a canine shadow being cast by the fire inside. He turned to face it, placing his hands together while planting his feet firmly in place. Huh? He exclaimed as his hands hardened. Emerging from the inferno was a small wolf. Except it wasn't. Standing on its mangled hind legs and carrying a child in each of its bloody and burnt arms, as well as a chunk of meat in its ravenous jaws. It walked briskly and left them lying there on the street before charging back into the building. What? Oakley rushed to the children's side, checking their pulse while breathing a sigh of relief. What's happening, Oakley? Lady Pelena shouted from above as a deluge of water flooded the brewery, flushing out everyone inside. Flying above the fire, a giant bird circled around before landing next to Oakley. It waddled over, growing even larger in size and shedding its feathers until Lady Pelena was standing beside him. Did anyone not make it out? Oakley pointed toward the doorway that the wolf creature walked through previously, and trudging out came that same beast, carrying another child in its hand and another chunk of meat in another. Oakley turned, seeing the vice chief ready her crossbow. Wait! Before he could even finish a word, she let a bolt fly as the beast took off toward the edge of the village. After it! She yelled, giving chase on foot as Oakley quickly ran after her. He caught up with her in no time, and the two of them had the beast in their sights just as it left the village. and enter the wetlands surrounding its southern side. The two guild members quickly found themselves knee-deep in water, though it seemed as though only Pelina was hindered by the terrain. "I'll catch up. Go ahead without me. It's still got that kid." With a swift nod, Oakley rushed forward, tree roots seeming to rise up from under the water to meet his footfalls. Leaping from root to root, he came upon the creature setting down the child on the branches of one of the lower trees. "What are you?" he asked as he approached, the creature turning on its heel to face him with a fearful look in its eye. It stood there, staring, before turning to pick up the child and reaching out to Oakley. Oakley took the kid, one of the older children in the village with no place to call home. He was soaked to the bone, and his left side was scorched and scarred. The beast looked worried, yet that fell away to shock and pain as the sound of something flying through the air reached everyone's ears before being interrupted by its pained howl. Overhead, flapping her wings while aiming her crossbow with her feet, Lady Pelina's eyes were locked onto the wolf. "It's a werewolf. Don't let it bite you. Restrain it, Oakley." A tree suddenly shot upward, extending and growing to attempt to strike the ranger out of the sky. "What are you doing?" Oakley remained silent, putting the child down as a bed of roots rose up from the water. I. This isn't right," he yelled as Pelina used the growing trees as cover, diving into the canopy. The sound of branches being brushed aside surrounded Oakley and the beast as he moved to protect it. "There will be consequences for this, Oakley." Lady Pelina dove down from above them, back to being fully human and with a sword in her hands. It struck Oakley's arm, embedding itself as the two glared at each other. "Disobeying a direct order from a superior," she said, striking his abdomen with her foot before pulling her sword free. Oakley leapt back, steadying his footing and gliding across the surface of the water atop a pair of platforms made of tree roots. His body encased by brown bark, his eyes glowing a faint green as tendrils of wood erupted from his back and darted toward Pelina. The vice chief dodged as many as she could, closing the distance by jumping from tendril to tendril with nothing but a few scratches to show for her struggle. Protecting a monster? She managed to get out before Oakley's heel collided with her head and forced her into the mud and water. She slashed upwards, striking Oakley across his torso as vines rose up from beneath the water. They formed a cocoon around her, but they were too slow to constrict. She leapt up and changed her form once more, but Oakley was quick to pursue her. He commanded the vines to chase after her as she circled around him and aimed for the beast. Harboring the suspect of arson? She shifted back in midair, swinging her sword down toward the wolf's head. Oakley's arm blocked the blade again, pushing her away as she twisted her body to kick his head before she was sent flying. She landed with a splash as Oakley glided over and threw a punch her way as a net of plants formed a bubble around the werewolf and child. Helena caught his hand before thrusting her sword into his gut. He winced in pain, but steadied himself enough to strike her abdomen with both of his palms. They were running toward each other, both ready to throw another blow, but the sound of clapping and laughter took both of them by surprise. Now, let's calm down. A voice came from the direction of the village. The trees bended, forming an archway as a tiny man came walking on air. Chief! The two guild members turned to meet the man, his cheeks rosy and his face plastered with a wide smile. Oakley raised his arms, ready to continue the fight, but the chief just shook his head. He slowly walked over to the bubble of vines, looking inside. Oakley, do you know these kids? Chief Sainamo asked, touching the top of the bubble and causing the plants to shrink and return to the way they were. There, it's going to be all right, he said soothingly. Oakley rushed over, seeing the girl from earlier clutching her stomach as the crossbow bolt stuck out. The chief gently pulled it out and covered the wound with his hand, stopping the bleeding. I met the girl earlier. Well, Helena was right. There are consequences for what you did tonight. The chief looked up at Oakley, his eyes shut as he pondered for a moment. Hey, kid, what's your name? The girl, her voice wavering, squeaked, I don't have one. The adults paused, with the chief pressing his fingers into his chin. Well, Oakley, give her a name. What? Everyone raised an eyebrow and stared at the tiny man, yet he looked completely serious. Your punishment is to be responsible for these two. Now, it's not going to be good if you go around calling her girl every day, he said, turning to look into Oakley's eyes. Now, what's her name? Helena shook her head. The child looked around confused, and Oakley thought before opening his lips. Where I'm from, we get our names from the things around us. So, your name is... That fateful night, where destinies collided 10 years ago, still rests vividly in the minds of all those involved. What's this? Lady Pelena asked, looking at the papers that were slid across her desk. You're handing in your resignation? The person in question simply placed a hand on their hip, letting out a sigh. I have to find him. He just up and left. I... I've got a bad feeling about this. He's been gone for 3 years. Let it go, kid. I know Oakley means a lot to you, but you can't just leave like he did, Helena grumbled, looking over at the list of jobs on the board nearby. I wish he didn't drill that insubordination into you, she added in a hushed voice. You're the one that broke into the filing cabinet the other day, weren't you? The vice chief narrowed her eyes, seeing a slight twinge of guilt in the other's expression. I'm going. I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to find him. Well, if you're going to go search for him, you better at least know this. Walking down the stairs with an envelope in hand, Chief Sainamo greeted the two of them with a stern look. He snapped his fingers and the air whipped up in circles around all of them. Now that no one else can hear me, he said before pulling out the letter. Chief, I'm leaving my badge in this envelope and going somewhere. Take this as my resignation. I've heard of troubles back home and I'm going there to investigate. Don't send anyone to follow me. I'm not sure if what I'll find will be good for anyone, but I can't just ignore this. Take care of the kids for me, and don't let them come after me. They aren't strong enough. They're the future of this world, but they're not ready for it yet. That doesn't change anything. I'm still going. If this is really as dangerous as he says it is, then I want to help him. If it isn't, then I'll ask him why he hasn't come back yet. Didn't you pay attention? Oakley specifically said. Do you think you're ready? The gnome said, pocketing the letter as the wind died down and the new member walked toward the door. Fur grew out of their skin as they cracked their knuckles, throwing a coat over their shoulders and grabbing a bag that was resting on a nearby chair. They turned to face the room, standing in the doorway of the building as the moon beamed down from above. Yes, go find him, Ash, the chief said as the werewolf walked out with a determined look in their eyes. Her fur a soft gray, Ash fully shifted and ran out of town with nothing but her clothes and the contents of her bag.